Hi, I'm Rachel and I work at Talbot's Law as HR Director, which means I do HR and recruitment for over 200 people across our company in the region. So I've worked here for 4.5 years and I've been actually in legal practice for quite a while longer. My job is to serve, support and encourage all the people here to find and fulfil their unique potential in law and their careers and to be the best that they can be. Talbot's is a great place to work. One of the reasons for that is our company values. Our company values, if you've not seen them, check the website, offer everything from bringing our passion to work, talking a language that people understand and doing the right thing every time. And as I was preparing that, I just felt how similar that was to everything I do at home and at church. So I've been a member of Life Central for just under 2 years, a Christian for a long time, baptised back in 2010. So I primarily serve at Hagley and I'm involved in quite a few different activities across the church, which I absolutely love and enjoy. I've got a massive heart for helping people to find their unique purpose. I really believe that God's got a unique purpose for each one of us and He's put us in a place with our own set of circumstances and relationships that can really bring glory to Him. And it's glory to Him, not about us. So I'm passionate about what I do, passionate about my church, passionate about following Jesus and helping people to find and follow Jesus. So I'm Rachel and that's what it's like to walk in my shoes.
You know, it's nice that me and Abby have dressed to match. It's kind of like Life Central Church, brought to you in association with shortbread this morning. Do you know, they say that you end up like your parents, and maybe if you are a new parent or you're a parent of younger children, you find yourself saying the things that your parents said to you when you were a kid. And as a youth leader, I'm not a parent yet, but as a youth leader, I find myself saying things that teachers and my parents said to me. And one of the phrases I say a lot to young people, particularly at our Friday night youth club that we run, is when I ask somebody to do something or not to do something or to get down off something or to stop kicking somebody in the head, I'll say, "Can you not do that, please?" And they'll go, "Why?" And I'll go, "Because I told you so. That's why." And that phrase, when I say it, I can almost feel like my mum and dad coming through me when I say it. And I hated it as a teenager. Why? Because I told you to. That's why. And I think the phrase is kind of like saying, I have the authority, therefore I don't need to give you a reason. You just need to do it because I've got the authority. And authority in that phrase, because I told you to, is not something that we enjoy. Authority is maybe not a notion that we particularly enjoy, and we naturally want to challenge it as humans. But you know, we're going to walk in the shoes this morning of somebody who understood that phrase in a different light, and they had a very interesting encounter and conversation with Jesus. You see, the person whose shoes that we are walking in today is represented by army boots, and it is the Roman centurion. And if you're not familiar with the story, we're going to go through the story together. But here is a guy who understood what it meant, the phrase, because I told you to, because he wouldn't ask why. He would just do as he was told in the army. And Jesus meets this Roman centurion. And a Roman centurion, interestingly, is called a Roman centurion because he was typically in charge of around about 100 soldiers. So he wasn't like the leader of the Roman army. He wasn't really high up, but he was quite high up to be in charge of around about 100 soldiers. And typically the Romans were seen as the enemy to the Jewish people. And they were kind of, Jews didn't like them. To interact with them was not something that a lot of Jews did. And he has a really interesting conversation with Jesus, and we're going to go through it together. It appears in the book of Matthew. Matthew is in the New Testament. You know, the Bible is not just one book. It's a collection of many books. And Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all write about Jesus. And these guys, when they were writing this stuff, didn't think, I am writing the Bible. They were just writing down stuff that they saw Jesus say and do, and thought, actually, we need to communicate this so that the Christians that come after us know who Jesus was. So this is written down for us to understand who Jesus was. And as we work through it, I want to just credit some thoughts that I've taken from a guy called Levi Lusko, who's a church leader in America. I want to credit that I've taken some of his thoughts, but also added lots of my own thoughts in it today. So we're going to look at Matthew 5. It's going to come up on the screen. Sorry, Matthew 8, verse 5. And it says this: when Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him asking for help. Lord, he said, my servant lies at home, paralyzed, suffering terribly. Now, I've never been paralyzed. I don't know what it feels like to be paralyzed. But you know when you're dreaming and you're kind of having a dream and someone's like chasing you or something's coming at you and you can't quite move quick enough and you feel frustrated in your sleep and something's coming at you and you can't dodge it, or you're trying to run away and you can't run away? Do you know that's known as sleep paralysis? And that is horrible. I hate it when I have it. But you know, that moment when you suddenly wake up and you like bolt upright in bed all of a sudden, or you accidentally kick your wife, because you're suddenly freed from this paralysis. You see, I don't know what it is to be paralyzed, but those experiences when I've been dreaming and had sleep paralysis have been absolutely awful. I cannot imagine what this guy's servant is going through. It must be horrendous. And interestingly, we already get an insight into the Roman centurion's character, because he's not coming to Jesus on his own behalf. He's coming to Jesus on behalf of somebody who he is in authority over. We can already see that this is a leader who has compassion for those that he leads. We can already see that this is a leader who doesn't just say, because I told you to. He is a leader who cares about who he has authority over. And if we carry on reading together, Jesus said to him, shall I come and heal him? The centurion replied, Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. Now, people who weren't Jews would be known as Gentiles. Anybody who wasn't part of the Jewish nation would be known as a Gentile. So this Roman centurion is known as a Gentile. And Jews believed that if they went into the house of a Gentile, that they would become unclean. So the Roman centurion is saying to this guy, if you come in my house, you'll believe that you're unclean, and I don't want that for you, Jesus. And it's kind of like, you know, like in school when you knew that one person had nits, and you knew that if you went near them, you would instantly feel unclean. Like, I can see, even just the mention of the word nits, some of you are starting to scratch your heads. It's amazing the power of what gets put in your mind. But you know, if you came into contact with that person, you were like, oh gosh, I need to go and wash my hair now. Like, and Jews believe that, but in kind of a bigger picture and a kind of more serious manner. And let me just say, that kind of attitude is really, really ugly to God. Do you know, we want you to know that it doesn't matter the colour of your skin. It doesn't matter where you grew up. It doesn't matter your gender. It doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter your political standpoint. We are all equally lovable to God. And you know, we want you to know at Life Central that you are really, really welcome here. It doesn't matter what your background. It doesn't matter whether you consider yourself a follower of Jesus or not. We want you to know that you are welcome here, and we want you to feel like you belong here, because you do. And Jesus kind of speaks into it, and we go into the next verse. He says, but just say the word. This is the Roman centurion speaking. He says, but just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes, and to that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. Some of you are thinking, I wish my kids were like that. But interestingly, up to this point in the book of Matthew, Jesus had been present for every single miracle. So he'd been there at the wedding when he turned water into wine. He was there on the hill for the feeding of the 5,000. He'd been effectively in the room, or there geographically, when the miracle occurred. And here's a guy who we don't know yet whether he was a follower of Jesus, but he is coming to Jesus and he's saying, look, I understand how authority works. If you say it can be done, you can do a long-distance miracle. I've never seen you do it before. There's no record of you doing it before. But if you say it will happen, I believe that it can happen. And I think it's an incredible thing to just notice there that he calls something new out of Jesus. You see, just because you've never seen it happen before, it doesn't mean it can't happen. Just because you've never heard God speak to you, it doesn't mean that God can't speak to you this morning. Just because you've never encountered God to be real in your life, it doesn't mean that God can't be real in your life today. Just because you've never lived out your faith in your workplace or your school or your college, it doesn't mean that you can't do that. Just because you've never seen one of your friends or family come to an Easter production or a Christmas production or sign up to Alpha, it doesn't mean that Jesus can't do that. You see, here's a guy who we don't know whether he follows Jesus, but he comes to him and goes, "Hey, Jesus, I think you could do this. Like, surely you could do a long-distance miracle, because I understand what it means to have authority." And we're going to carry on. It says in the next bit, when Jesus heard this, he was amazed. Now, I think it's pretty impressive to amaze Jesus. Like, Jesus kind of part of the team that created the world, like kind of God in human form. How on earth do you amaze like the Son of God, you know, guy who's fed 5,000 people with just 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Like, how on earth is Jesus amazed? And in fact, some versions and some translations of the Bible say that Jesus marveled at the faith of the guy. And you know, there's only 2 times in the Bible where Jesus is amazed. This moment and another moment where he's amazed at the lack of people's faith. You see, when we lean in and fully trust and believe in who Jesus is, when Lee was mentioning there about the song, when we fully believe and live it out, it incredibly amazes Jesus. And I think that's quite challenging. And then he turns to the people and he says this in the next bit. He says, "And he said to those following him, 'Truly I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith.'" It's kind of like shots fired in this moment. He's turning to all the Jewish people and he's saying, "All of you, I've not seen faith in any of you like this guy has got right here." He's using this guy as an example. And it's kind of like somebody who would walk into church for the first time today, and Jesus would point to them and say, "See that person? They love me and follow me closer than you do who've been coming for 20 years. Like, if Jesus did that, I would be like, what? I would feel really challenged about that. I would think, I've got to step up my game here. I need to step up how I'm living out my faith. And Jesus kind of gives a little shot to the Jews that are kind of there. And then he says, then Jesus said to the centurion, "Go, let it be done just as you believed it would." And his servant was healed at that moment. Now imagine, we're going to walk in the shoes of the servant for a moment. Imagine being the servant. We don't know whether the centurion had told him that he was going. But let's, for a moment, just for kind of poetic license, assume that the servant didn't know that the centurion was coming to Jesus. Imagine being the servant, that you're sat there and you're paralyzed, you can't move, you're in lots of pain, you don't know what's going on, you're struggling terribly, and all of a sudden, in an instant, out of nowhere, no one comes in your room, no one does anything, all of a sudden, bang, you can dance, you can run around your room, you're celebrating, you're like, I can move, and all the pain has gone. Imagine that moment. That would have been incredible. Imagine being in the room and all of a sudden, like, it just being fine. I think it's amazing. And some people say the Bible is boring. I mean, you need to get a life if you think the Bible is boring, because it's not. There is so much in there. And you see, there's so much that I could pull out of this. But I want to focus in on what we looked at in verse 9. So if we could flick back to verse 9, please, Ryan. It says, "But just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes, and to that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it." You see, this guy understands authority. He understands what it means to be under authority and to have it over others. And authority typically is not a word or a notion that we enjoy. I think that's often why we ask why to the "can you do this" thing, because we want to know, we want to understand whether we should obey that order. We want to understand whether we should do as we're told. We want a reason. And you know, I think he has authority over people because he knows how to be under authority. This is a guy who's in middle management in the Roman army, and he's able to have authority over because he knows how to be under. You see, how you respond to the authority that you're under will determine the level of authority that you have over others. And you know, we love to have kind of quotes from talks that are inspiring, that are Instagrammable. We love to feel fired up, and we want to go out and change the world. But you know, if we switch the word authority to be influence, because essentially having authority is having influence over somebody. You see, when we understand that we all have influence, you know, you might sit there and think, well, I don't have authority over anybody. We all have influence over, and when we have influence on somebody, we have authority in their life. You know, and I think if we want to impact the world and make it a better place, we've got to realize that we have influence. And we've got to realize that if we want to have influence and we want to change the world, we've got to understand what it means to be under authority. And what I want to do is pull out just two main points from this and explore authority together. And the first one is this, is that God is the author of authority. You see, you can't spell the word authority without the word author. You can see it there. And you know, there is no authority in the world that God hasn't given. You know, in your life, I said it earlier, in your life you will have and will encounter authority that drives you mad, authority that frustrates you. There'll be times when you feel like authority in your life isn't right. And just as a side point, I want to make really clear, I'm not talking about when authority is abusive or harmful. If there is authority in your life that is abusive and harmful, you need to report that. You need to take that forward, and you need to respond to that in a way that is kind of in the legal proceedings. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when authority rubs us up the wrong way, when it frustrates us, when we disagree with it. You know, it can make us feel like ignoring people. It can make us feel like pushing back. It can make us feel like digging our heels in and being difficult. It can make us feel like telling them to do one or slapping them in the face. Authority, when it is difficult, is really, really hard. And you know, it won't surprise you that in my life I've had numerous moments where I have had difficulties with authority and not responded in the right way. I remember in a previous job, on two separate occasions with two different line managers, I text them to say that I disagreed with the decision that they had made and I thought that they were a terrible boss. I did that on two separate occasions, and I was so brave and believed in it so much that I sent it via text message rather than saying it myself. And thankfully, I have matured slightly since then, and that is not something that I would do and learned from those awful mistakes. So when I speak to you on this, I'm not saying I've got all this nailed. Or I'm preaching to myself, and I'm speaking this over myself, and I'm teaching myself, and I've been teaching myself as I've been preparing for this. But you know, there's another guy who wrote most of the Bible, a guy called Paul, and he wrote most of the New Testament. And he's writing to the people who are now followers of Jesus in Rome. Interestingly, that we're looking at the Roman centurion, and now the kind of Jesus following movement has moved to Rome, and the Christians in Rome are trying to figure out how they live out their faith, how they live out their faith in their daily life. What does it mean to be a Christian and part of the church in Rome? And Paul writes this to them in Romans. He says, "Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established." For there is no authority except that which God has established. You see, what he's saying is we need to be subject to the authority that God has established over us. Yeah, but Andy, you don't know my line manager. He is an absolute idiot. You don't know how bad he is as a boss. We need to be subject to that authority. Yeah, but Andy, you don't know my science teacher. My science teacher treats me, he picks on me, he treats me like absolute dirt. We need to be subject to that authority. Yeah, but Andy, Paul doesn't understand what it means to live in Brexit. He doesn't understand what it means to live in a political world like today. He doesn't understand what it means to live in a world where Donald Trump is the president of the United States. Let me tell you this. Paul is writing to the Romans who are in Rome. The emperor, or the Caesar, is Caesar Nero at that time. Caesar Nero was burning Christians alive. You see, Paul understood what it meant to be under authority. And these guys are challenging with this authority and going, what do we do? Do we rebel? Do we do something? And he's saying you need to be subject to the authority that God has established over you. And that is really, really hard. You know, if God's put it in place, we need to come under it. How we deal with human authority shows how we are willing to respond to God's authority. And you know, for me, in times in my life where I've experienced challenging authority, I think there's some things that I've learned. I think one of the things you can do is you can own what you can own. You take responsibility for what is your responsibility. If you make a mistake, you own what you can own. Even if your boss comes down on you like a ton of bricks, you can own what you can own. I think you can work really hard and serve faithfully. The Bible talks about doing everything as though you're doing it for God himself. You know, if you find yourself in challenging authorities, don't dig your heels in. Work harder. Don't push back. Serve faithfully. Let's own what we can own and serve faithfully. And you know, this centurion got to where he was probably because he was better at carrying out orders than he was at asking questions. And you know, we are not really a culture. Most of us don't work in a culture where you just do as you're told. Often we work where we're working collaboratively with our line managers. But you know, if you are struggling with authority at the moment, I want to invite you to walk in the shoes of your boss, of that person that is challenging. Maybe if you're a young person, maybe walk in the shoes of your parents for a moment. Maybe walk in the shoes of your landlord, if that's the authority that you're struggling with at the moment. Walk in their shoes and just have a think for a moment. What's their world like? What's the responsibility that they're carrying? What's their story? What's going on in their world? You know, when I do sessions with kind of other youth workers and talk about how we manage difficult behavior in young people, one of the things that we often say is when you fail to understand story, you fail to have compassion. And when you understand people's story, you can have compassion on them. And the best way to understand people's stories is to walk in their shoes for a bit. So maybe there's a place where we need to have compassion on those in authority over us. We need to walk in their shoes so that we can understand their story and have that compassion. You know, over the last 18 months or so, I've been doing some sessions with other youth pastors about how to lead up and how to manage your managers. And myself and Leon, who's our lead pastor, and we've been sharing kind of bits of our working relationship and talking through some stuff and helping them to kind of work with their senior and lead pastors. And one of the things that I've been sharing is actually it's helped me to be better at being under Leon's authority by understanding how he works, understanding how he's wired, understanding what drives him mad, understanding how he wants to hear things. That has helped me to work with him much, much better, and our relationship has improved. You know, I've seen it with young people who have struggled with me and the way that I lead, and actually they've begun to understand me a little bit more. And there's some young people that 2 or 3 years ago would have said they don't like me at all, and we've gone on a journey together and we've begun to understand each other more, and we've walked in each other's shoes, and they now really respect me, apparently. And we get each other more and we can work together. You know, I think when it comes to walking in the shoes of those in authority, I think this could not apply more at the moment than it does to politics. I think we collectively as the church, we need to be thinking about how we walk in the shoes of those politicians. And something that will help us is something that Paul, who was writing to the Romans, he's writing to a guy called Timothy, who's a young guy leading a church. And he says this to Timothy. He says, "Pray this way for kings and all who are in authority, so that we can live peaceful and quiet lives marked by godliness and dignity." We need to be praying for our politicians right now. We need to be praying for those who have been elected into authority. I understand less about Brexit by the day, but what I understand is that I need to pray for these politicians. You know, no matter where you fall on the referendum side and all that kind of stuff, whatever your political leaning, we need to be praying for Theresa May. You know, I feel so sorry for the woman, and you could not pay me enough money in the world to walk in her shoes for a couple of hours. Like, we need to be praying for those who are in authority. And if you want to join us in that, we've got a prayer event on the 28th of March where we're going to be praying into it. It was supposed to be praying into what's happening the next day, Brexit. So who knows what's going to happen with that. But we need to pray. And it's interestingly in this Bible verse, it says, so that we can live peaceful and quiet lives marked by godliness and dignity. You see, when we pray for those who are in authority, it prevents us from getting bitter. It says we want to walk in their shoes. We want to pray for them, and it can stop us getting bitter. And Joanna Weaver says this about bitterness. She says, bitterness is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. And you know, when authority is challenging in our lives, when we're struggling with a boss or a teacher or a landlord or a parent or whatever, it can make us want to become bitter to them. But bitterness doesn't help anyone, it only harms you. And it is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. You see, when we pray, it stops our hearts getting bitter. My second point, as the band want to make their way up, my second point is this, is that God is the ultimate authority. You see, whatever happens with Brexit, God is still in control. Whatever happens in the next general election, whenever it is, God is in control. Whatever happens in your workplace, God is in control. You see, God is the ultimate authority. I own an iPhone, and a lot of you here will own smartphones by various different companies. There are good smartphones available, not just iPhones. And I own an iPhone now, and Apple are the ultimate authority on my phone. And I can download as many different apps as I want that my memory will allow me. I can install loads of different apps. You know, we could have the same make and model of phone, but they look very different because of the apps that we have got on them. And you know, when you load up a phone, there are certain apps that Apple won't let you delete. There are certain things that you have to have on there. That they are the ultimate authority on my phone, and therefore they say that's got to stay on there. One of those apps is stocks. Like, why on earth do I need stocks on my phone? Apple tell me I've got to have stocks. And I don't get it. I'm a youth worker. Like, I work in a church. Why on earth do I need to know how the footsie and the whatever is doing? Like, I don't need to know that, but Apple tell me I've got to have it on my phone, so I have to have it on my phone, and I have to keep it there. And, you know, if you're a Christian in the room, if you call yourself a follower of Jesus, like, there are certain things that are just coming under the authority of God. There are certain things that we just need to do. There are certain things that are just obedience issues. You know, there are things in the Bible that I wish weren't there. There are things that Jesus taught and said that I wish he didn't say, because following him would be much, much easier. But he said them. And these things are obedience issues. And you know, if you're not a Christian and wouldn't call yourself a follower of Jesus, you can have a free pass on that. You don't have to do it. But if you're with a Christian, nudge them and say, you do. But you see, there are things in our lives that are just obedience issues. Jesus said himself, he said, if you love me, obey my commands. Maybe some of us have been pushing back on the authority of God. Maybe we've been stepping out and pushing back and saying, I'm not going to do that, Jesus. Maybe Jesus has been challenging you and calling you to live out your faith in your workplace more, or he's been calling you to invite friends to church, or whatever it is, you know that Jesus has been saying stuff. See, the centurion says, say the word and it will be done. Maybe Jesus has been saying some words to you, and you just need to go, I need to come under the authority of God. Maybe we need to understand that Jesus is the ultimate authority. I wonder if we could stand together, all of us, if you're able to. And for one last time, I want us to walk in the shoes of the Roman centurion. You see, his servant is dying. His servant is struggling. His servant is in pain. And he's lost. He doesn't know what to do. He's worried. He's stressed. He's terrified of what's going to happen to his servant. But he's heard these rumors. He's seen some stuff on Facebook. This Jesus fella is saying some good stuff. I've heard some rumors that Jesus can heal. I've heard what he's done in different places. Maybe he could help my servant. And he goes and he seeks him out. And he comes to him and he says, Jesus, you say the words and it can be done. I wonder, what are the circumstances that we need a word from Jesus on today? Maybe you're in the midst of some stuff that is challenging, that you feel desperate, that you feel like, man, I don't know which way to turn. Maybe this morning you could turn to Jesus and say, would you say the words? Would you do something in this? Jesus, I need you to speak into this. And I want us to pray. We're going to sing together in a moment, and we're going to sing a song that says, Jesus at the center of it all. And it's reminding us who the ultimate authority is, and saying, Jesus, I want you at the center. I want you to be the ultimate authority. I want to respond to your authority and say I'm coming under it. But before we sing that, I want to give an opportunity to pray for those who find themselves struggling with authority. Maybe it's your workplace, maybe it's home, maybe it's with your landlord, maybe it's with the police, I don't know, maybe it's politically and you've been really struggling with this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to invite you to take a seat. And if that's you and you want to say, yeah, I need some prayer into this, I'm going to invite you in a moment to take a seat, and then I'm going to ask those that are around you to just stick a hand on your shoulder and just to pray for you. Okay, and nobody's going to do anything weird. We just want to pray for you in that situation. And you sitting down is you responding and saying, I find this really hard, Jesus, but I know that you asked me to come under the authority, and you have established authority, and I want to serve. I want to walk in the shoes that you would want me to walk in this situation. So maybe if we all bowed our heads and closed our eyes, not that that's magical, but it just gives people a bit of privacy if they want to respond. So if that's you and you find yourself struggling with authority, I want to invite you now to just grab a seat. Maybe if there's someone around you that's taken a seat, if you would be comfortable to just stick a hand on their shoulder. And we're going to pray for them collectively and individually as well. Jesus, I thank you that you understand authority, that you are the ultimate authority. God, and I pray for the people that are responding to say that they are struggling with authority right now. God, I pray that you would help them to walk in a way that you would want them to walk. God, I pray that you would help them to pray for those that are in authority over them. God, I pray that you would help them to work and respond in the right way. God, I pray for a sense of peace. God, I pray against bitterness being stored up in people's hearts. Lord, I pray in the name of Jesus that you would release bitterness. God, I pray that you would help them to forgive, and not just forgive once, but to continually to forgive. And Jesus, for all of us, we want to acknowledge that you are the ultimate authority. God, that no matter the circumstances, no matter what goes on in our world, you are in control. So God, I pray as we sing and as we respond, Jesus, I pray that this wouldn't just be words in a song to finish off the service nicely, but God, I pray that this will be something that speaks over us, that maybe we're not in the midst of difficult authority now, but maybe in another season, in the future, we might be. God, I pray that you would remind us of this moment. In your mighty name.